light of the Bodhisattvas assembled in the Himalayas. I am one. I am the lotus-born one, and I am with you in the West. Padma, Sambhava. In the light of the Buddha, I salute the eternal Isa, sun emanation of Ishvara, light of Krishna, beautiful one of the Buddha. Thy light and thy path is a herald unto the east and the west. By thy light, O Saint Isa, thy light has truly illumined a path of compassion with Maitreya, a compassion that does stand for the judgment of those who oppress the people of God. By thy light, Jesus, there is therefore in the earth in this hour and in the sign of the spring again and again the encounter of the Buddha with Mara, with a seed of the wicked, as thou hast placed thyself between the innocent and the enemy, so all bodhisattvas call to thee in this hour for the defense of the light against world atheism and the fallen angels yet with us for a little while. The cries for mercy and for intercession are heard from the very hearts of the devotees of Tibet and of the Christians in the Middle East and the lovers of Mary in Central America. Everywhere where light is oppressed, O come, Saint Isa, thou the Buddha unto the east, the Savior of all nations, thou the one and the present, the emanation, the brother of Gautama. Sent by the bodhisattvas of the east unto the disciples of the west, I am Padma Sambhava, sending the call to the hearts of those who have entered the light of the word and its power. The plea is so very simple. They say to you and to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, help us, help us. Deliver us now that we might worship, that we might be devotees of the mind of God. Deliver us then from the oppression of world communism. Restore to us our sacred shrines. Let our cup be filled. Let the land be returned in freedom to the people. Beloved hearts, it is the desire of the Lord of the world, Gautama, that this Easter in contemplation of the self-transcendence of the living Christ Jesus, you reinforce your call for the binding and the judgment and the casting out of the world conspiracy of communism and the collaborators with it, aiding and abetting it out of the West, selling technology and advanced science for the further proliferation of war and the taking over state by state of those nations in the same way that Tibet and all of China have been swallowed up by this darkness. In the heart of the Buddha, I plead for intercession from all in embodiment who count themselves disciples on the path. For it is our desire that you take the cup of understanding and realize that everywhere where religion and faith have been destroyed and the prayers silenced and the shrine of the candle destroyed, there, beloved hearts, has been a shifting of the balance of light in the earth. There has been subsequent desecration of the people, the women, and the children. Realize then that the balance of spiritual power in the earth is threatened this day in India and other nations of the East, in the Middle East, and in South America. Realize that the true intent of world communism and all who assist it or stand by and allow it is to wipe out the living flame of the devotee by which the contact with God for the whole earth and nature kingdom is sustained. The lifting up of the lotus of the heart with the candle burning in the very center is that contact with the Divine One, even reaching to the very heart of nirvana. The devotees of God have been placed in all nations because they are the living focus of the etheric retreats and of the ascended masters. As they have been removed and the cycles have turned and there has been less devotion in many quarters, so a great darkness has come upon the earth, which has been the lamentation of Mother Mary. Therefore, on behalf of the restoration of the lawful and wholesome focalization of the devotion of prayer and meditation of God and the power of the Word, I speak on behalf of your endeavor of a perpetual vigil of the hours to contain and turn back world communism. And let those who live in Western nations whose governments allow trade and the free use of their private corporations to transmit the greatest secrets of defense from America. Take heed that you give your dynamic decrees for the exposure to the people of this condition and the reversing of the entire process. For that which is necessary to the keeping of the flame of peace must be guarded, even as cherubim keep the way of the tree of life. if those who are on a collision course with their own destiny and the death they have set in motion would take the world with them and plunge it headlong into the chaos of war, would you not rather prevent it in the hour when prevention is possible than await the day when truly all hell breaks loose for the devouring of the light and the souls of nations? The Buddhas out of the east unto the west, the light of Kuan Yin, the reflection of MORYA as he ponders this political equation. These are with us tonight as we also commemorate with Jesus the Last Supper. It is a commemoration of the gathering of the representatives of the 12 tribes, even through the souls of the 12 disciples. It is a remembrance of the hour of the mission of Jesus, when the apostles must go forth to deliver the word, and indeed they did, great distances, establishing and re-establishing his light through the Middle and Far East, through the Mediterranean, and those whom they blessed, taking that message far and wide. The power of the cup of life, the power then of the chalice of thy being, is the living grail, and this grail may be used again for the transfer of the wine and the power of the life essence of Jesus and even of the Christ within you for healing, moreover for the turning back of that darkness and malintent of world communism, born not only of fear but of revenge and of jealousy of the Christed nation. I portray to you this evening figures of saints and pilgrims, bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and of the Lord of the world, all meditating on this one awareness, drawing from the Godhead, calling to the very heart of nirvana for still other Buddhas to come forth for one concerted purpose, and that is, beloved hearts, the staying by the hand of Almighty God through the upraised hand of the living Saint Isa and the living Gautama, of the entire momentum of world communism and its sympathizers. Blessed hearts, it has reached an hour and a moment when the call of Kuan Yin and of MORYA must be heeded with an extraordinary impetus of power going forth. It is also an hour of the weakness of the astral forces that have reinforced this darkness for centuries. It is, in fact, by the sign of the 3 wise men, a propitious moment for these calls to be most effective. Therefore heed us and wonder not, for those things which shall come to pass on earth can be mitigated if you act now. I tell you, beloved hearts, this subject which I have opened, and my deliverance to you of the plea of the disciples of the Buddha and the Christ, is the subject in this hour of many masters and disciples gathered at the etheric plane, each at the table, each sharing the bread and the wine in remembrance of the victory of this hour, and in the understanding of this crux of initiation borne by Jesus, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha, the Christ. Therefore, by this oneness and communion in the light of Alpha and Omega, there is a determination of ascended hosts to establish a union and a strength among all devotees in embodiment and at inner planes on this one most essential point of the law, the necessity of the encounter, that their sin might be counted and imputed unto them and retained. Thus shall darkness be separated out from light by the word and the call. Let us begin with this hemisphere and roll it back. Let us root out the hiding places, the groves and gathering places of agents of foreign powers that seek only to destroy this nation, places where terrorism is planned and the division of a people and the division of Canada and the United States. Divide and conquer is their tactic. The union and the strength of one single purpose is ours. In the name of the Universal Mother, I also now impress upon your heart this urgent need of the hour, with the understanding and the illumination that the power of the word in you, so transmitted this night by the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood, as the body and blood of the cosmic Christ, is able to turn back and consume all malintent of a planetary and interplanetary scale working presently through world communism. Beloved hearts, let it not happen again that the temples of the Buddha and the cathedrals of the Christ are made common, and thousands of years of light's recitation set aside, desecrated, though not squandered, for the holy angels have sealed that light and will place it again in the hearts of devotees who make their pilgrimage to the very presence of Helios in the heart of the inner retreat. Our reinforcement through the mountains of the north by the mantra of the light bearer is intended to feed into all of the mountain ranges of the planet that which has been lost through these attempts and mass murders and mayhem of these communist forces. The powers of hell have used them, but they may no longer do so if you make the call. The binding of these agents of death and their exorcism from the planet is a ritual that ought to be engaged in from morning till night on Good Friday. that the murder of millions and millions and the record thereof might be expiated on this Good Friday, that they might be bound and cast out of the astral plane of the earth, where they continue to focus the intent of the taking of the life of the holy innocents. This they have continued on all fronts, taking not only the life but the mind and the soul of children and youth, almost in numberless numbers, through drugs and chemicals and addictions, and the squandering pitifully of the life force. The assault is grave upon the body of God. I, Padma Sambhava, say to you, awake, awake and fulfill your destiny, and know that so few have the predilection for this encounter by the absolute light of God with this debased evil. Dear hearts of light, even some devotees of the Buddha, as devotees of Christ also, do not, cannot, will not understand or enter into the powerful dynamic decrees which do stop these hordes of darkness. Therefore recognize that there is a finite number of individuals on the planet who can receive this call and answer in the magnitude of the level of keepers of the flame, who have the names of God in the ascended masters, and truly understand what is demon possession, what is death and hell, and what are these entities, mass entities of hypnotic influence of world communism. As the spokesman for the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood this night, I therefore send the call and the plea from all octaves and levels, with one heart and voice and mind. Let us begin. For as you decree, ascended hosts and saints on the etheric octave will speak the word through you, by congruency through Christ, each one's Christ self and theirs. Thus your voice and chakras will count for the anchoring of their decrees from the etheric octave into these situations. You have but to name the conditions and give the call. And I tell you, the legions of light and the angels of the resurrection, led by Gabriel and Uriel and Archangel Michael, will come forth, and you will see a wonder and a sign and a miracle as you have never seen before, if you will make this Easter tide the one-pointed challenge and judgment of world communism and the resurrection of the sons of God as freedom flames in every nation. I am with you in this effort. The time to begin is now. Let some stay while others may leave and return early. Let not the flame go out in this sanctuary for 3 days, as these calls are given for the deliverance of the people oppressed by these forces of world communism. I am in the lotus of thy heart, always. Remember to call my name, for I too shall respond. Peace, Elohim. Eternal ones from God, I return to salute you in this hour of the commemoration of the crucifixion of the Lord and Savior, Christos, the one Jesus, in the meeting of God and man, at the sign of the cross, at the hour of 3, beloved hearts, we come to the understanding that the true awareness of one's identity is realized as one does lay down one's life and takes it again in the eternal mystery of the I Am. In the hour of 3 and the initiation thereof, you discover the light of the Sun of Righteousness, for the power of the Son of God is truly at its apex in the sign of Aries and in the hour of 3 which the sign portends. Therefore, beloved hearts, you may give that which can be given, which is this life, as Jesus did, and you may find again the life returned to you is another life more precious. That life more precious is the eternal life, the eternal wonder, the eternal presence of the Eternal One. I am Gabriel in the heart of the Son, and here in the heart of the Messenger, in the chapel of the Holy Grail, our sanctuary of light. I am here in the annunciation of this birth of Christ in you, by the true path of the cross, by the sign of the ruby ray and the white fire, and the implementation of the quadrants of Christhood, and your discipleship leading unto the presence of the Ancient of Days, Lord Sanat Kumara. Truly the history of the Holy Grail is a living history. It is a pageant and an epic. Surely it is, beloved ones, the power of the epic life of a Christ, lived through many centuries and incarnations. Thus the history of the Grail is the history of each one's path in the internalization of the Word. And the gleams of the Grail as the chalice of old become to you, beloved hearts, and awareness of your portion of the cup, until ye also may drink of the whole. Therefore, in the mystical body of God we find outlined the paths of many, and I stress this day the word eternal, that you might have fired within the mind, within the memory, called the subconscious mind, the recognition of your own eternal nature, eternal with God, one with a beginning, one in Elohim. Therefore think of eternity not so much as the future in this hour, but of an origin and what seems as past according to the reckoning of time and space. For the very foundations of your life and being have come through millions of cycles of your manifestation, always to the one end, to walk this earth or other worlds as a vessel for the Godhead. Therefore it is a moment and an hour to consider the meaning of that Grail, as Jesus did indeed hang physically from a physical cross in order to transmit a message that might never be lost, that the power of the resurrection is greater than all of the rulers of this world who would crucify the Christ in you, or nail even the very soul, if they could, in impalement upon a wooden cross. Dear hearts of light, not the crucifixion, but the eternal truth, that they had no power to kill him, to destroy him, to deter him, not their crucifixion, but the full power of the resurrection itself. This is the lesson, a lesson of an attempt failed to destroy the living God on earth. Having so failed, it shall not succeed again. Therefore, let purity be the sign of the celebration of the Good Friday, when the Son of God is eternally free from the seed of the wicked, and the sign of his presence, one with that cross, is the sign truly. Now is the judgment of the prince of this world. Indeed, now is the hour of the glorification of the Father within the Son. For they have failed, and they know it, and the light supreme of Sanat Kumara, who comes in the figure of the woman, must be as the eternal Virgin with us, the eternal light of Mary, the eternal light of your soul emerging. Understand then that the gift and the quest of the Grail, the history and the identification therewith, are all for the purpose of allowing the eternal light of the Word to deal with dark and darkening conditions, whereby, beloved hearts, it is seen that though there be attempts against this nation, both in the air and in the sea and on the land, though they try again to crucify the representatives of light and the sons of Ephraim and Manasseh, all attempts to crucify and destroy are put to naught by the eternal Word with us. I am Gabriel. I come with great confidence and power in the will of God and the ability to implement that will. You will hear of the directing of fire against an American plane by Soviet MiGs, and you will understand that everywhere on earth this day there is once again the attempt to put back upon the cross the sons of God and the seed of the woman. I, Gabriel, am at that cross, and I will not allow it. I place my very presence as a shield of light, and I speak that you may know that there is the avenging ones who usurp the avenging sword of the Archangel if they could, but they cannot. and therefore they move against even the very decrees of the word that have been sent forth as missiles of light which do not err, to bind the astral debris and consciousness and hordes that reinforce a world consciousness of tyranny and totalitarianism equal to that and greater than the Roman Empire, or of Babylon, Assyria, or of ancient China. Beloved hearts of the wind, of the fire, of the sword and the water, hearts of the body and blood of Christ, I am the friend of all. Indeed, I am your friend of light, as Mother has proclaimed. Will you not be my friend in this hour and join me in a sacred friendship, a divine relationship of trust, mutual service together?
Yes.
And the oneness as brothers, as sisters on the path, as family members, as you return, beloved hearts, to the company and bands of your origin, angelic hosts, so you have descended from our folds also, many of you, and others have come from Archangel Michael, or Jophiel, or Zadkiel, and you have taken up, therefore, by the very fact of your incarnation, the path of discipleship, the path of the Bodhisattva, taught to you by beloved Kuan Yin, just beyond the veil, whose mother presence of mercy, the essence of distilled light of the Buddha, so tenderly desires to clear the veils and to open the way for the perfect image of the Holy Grail before you. Even so it was in this hour that the veil that hung in the temple was rent in twain, that the soul might perceive the true high priest as the living word of Christ and the Christ self of each one. I, Gabriel, therefore stand with Kuan Yin and Lord Gautama, with the very sacred heart of Jesus, for the rending of the veil, whereby your soul might, with purity of gaze and mien, know face to face the person of the Comforter in your own Christ self. Blessed hearts of the living Word, the direct apprehension of the mysteries and of the living light, the sure understanding of the mathematics, the equation itself of initiation, does bring to you by the power of the Universal Mother that discipleship which is joyous, which is as a heart leaping in the sacred fire of the rite of spring. Beloved ones, there is joy in this path as no other joy you have ever known. And if there be burdens, and if there be seemingly untoward sacrifices, let me tell you, it is always because of ignorance of the path itself, ignorance of the way of God. If this be the path, beloved hearts, and come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord, to the golden age, and to a way of life that restores Eden. Verily I ask you, how can the path that leads to perfect joy be without that joy? If that which you are about is the regaining of paradise, and paradise is oneness with God and the angels, and the perfect love, and the innocence, and the resources, and all that life affords in the ongoing challenge of being, where there is no more sorrow or crying, or sadness or death, or rebellion against the Godhead, then, beloved hearts, is it not enough even to have the anticipation of that joy restored as you move on the road of life. But beloved ones, joy in your heart this day is not in the anticipating alone, for God has brought you much joy. Let no man take therefore thy crown of joy, or thy memory of thy youth, in the warmth of the mother's son. Oh, delight in the law of thy being, delight in facing even the resistance of night and astral plane to the oncoming light of thyself being born, created anew in God. Beloved ones, there is joy in conquering, there is joy in defeating the enemy that lurks within the garments, whether the enemy of greed, whether it be the enemy of overindulgence in food as gluttony, whether it be the enemy of selfishness or blindness. There is a joy in conquering. There is a joy self-fulfilling in becoming all that you are. And therefore God has given you a sword and the power of the word and a mighty heart and the pink rose as a remembrance of thy first love, love for the Father and the smile of thy mother in the innocence of new birth. I am Gabriel, and as you know, the poetry of my heart, the love of my very spirit, becomes sharper than the two-edged sword when dealing in the conditions of this world. I would tell you that by the power of Almighty God this day, the decision as dispensation unto you is given to summon legions of angels and armies of the Lord, once and for all to bind and put down the eternal round of nonsense that has been going on for centuries, of political feuds and power struggles and wars and skirmishes and takeovers and intrigues and murders. Beloved hearts of light, in the eternal self that you are, now take an overview of Earth's history. Look now and gaze upon the centuries since the departure from Eden, and see the repetitious cycles of human infamy. Why, one can predict, almost when half asleep, what is the next maneuver of the power elite as they move with such a limited repertoire of schemes, even of takeover. Delight therefore this day in the law of thy being, as the power of the cosmic cross of white fire. Delight in Alpha and Omega with you, and the power of God by the life essence which is released in commemoration of this divine event as the inner temple and true initiation of Jesus Christ, whereby the life and the momentum of the Savior is his gift to all who are his disciples. Receive then the Holy Ghost as the essence of his body and his blood, and with it slay therefore every facet of unreality. For to many who do not see or know or understand, beloved hearts, the conditions of this world seem very real. They must have reinforcement of the fire that is yours as you stand at the foot of the cross and perceive the crown of thy life everlasting and world karma cast into the lake of fire, and the entire future set before you when death and hell are no more, and the inhabitants thereof have ceased to breathe the very breath of the Holy Ghost, which they have denied, and brought upon themselves therefore the annihilation of identity. Beloved ones, these things will come to pass in a twinkling of the eye. And though the legend be not true concerning Joseph of Arimathea imprisoned, know this, beloved heart, that with the Grail chalice and with the infilling it of the light of Alpha and Omega, you will pass through the most arduous seeming and burdensome appearing initiations, truly as in a state of ecstasy and the bliss of the Buddha. This is the gift of a community above and below. This is the sign of the true city, the etheric city Los Angeles, from which this physical city derives its name. This is the sign of the New Jerusalem. This is the sign of the appearing of thy God. And this bliss, beloved hearts, will carry you through the hours when you must yet, beloved hearts, use the science of the word for the conclusion of the judgment of this world communism, already crumbling from within, already disintegrating, and yet appearing yet to have the strength in its mockery of the word to take over the planet. See that in the unbelief of this system it is not so. See that the very unreality believed in does not become the overcoming of the saints who know better and therefore truly ought to do better in the invocation of the word. Beloved hearts of living fire, truly I am that I am in thee, the seed of all overcoming. God has released his power through me for the accomplishment of what have appeared to be many miracles in many thousands of years, as I have been his messenger to the servants of God. Now I come and tell you that by the very power of the prophet to transmit the fire for the resurrection of the child, I, Gabriel, place my body congruent with your own, that you might receive the transfer of the chakras of the light of heaven for the express purpose of the resurrection of the whole body of God upon earth in this very weekend. They may not know the source of God or an archangel or a messenger or a disciple, but it matters not, for in the hour of the fruition and the calling and the glory, they shall all know me, saith the Lord, from the least unto the greatest, and behold, they shall see me face to face. Therefore keep the fire of an archangel, guard it, and tend the flame, O beloved ones. Understand the holiness of God and what God has purposed to do for you this day through me. This light can increase as you give calls to the violet flame, which will transmute resistance to the light and records of anti-light still existing in your own four lower bodies and consciousness. My beloved, hear me, for I tell you, this annunciation is to give you that light, that your body temple might be and remain a leaven, to leaven the whole consciousness of the people of God upon earth, and to strengthen them as they meet the oppressors and persecutors of the light. Even so, you know that this is part of the stage of the Bodhisattva. For what for is the light except to stand in its strength and to defeat the anti-light? Inasmuch as long, long ago there went forth from the very Godhead those angels who determined to take free will and perform their experiments outside of his for the fulfilling of a separate course. So therefore, there must come full circle the conclusion of that event, and they must show fruit and bring them before the Father and the Mother. And even so, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as apostles of Christ, therefore stand, their heart fires, separating the real from the unreal, in the judgment not only of the 12 tribes of the seed of Sanat Kumara, but also of the angels who went astray, many of whom have never turned about to follow in the course of life, not death, though admonished again and again by Moses and other prophets east and west to forsake their innate rebellion and their pride beyond any pride imaginable in the rejection of God and his emissaries. Therefore, beloved hearts, continue ye in this way of light swallowing up darkness, light challenging the anti-light, and standing in the very center of the eye of the vortex of God, unmoved, therefore, by the antics of these ones who will continue until they indeed actually march right off the screen of life. And having marched from the screen, there is no eye of God to project their image upon that screen any longer, and they cease to exist, beloved hearts, by their antipathy to the Godhead. I am in the diamond heart of MORYA and the Mother. I am in the shield of the night. I am in the heart of the rose, carried now by daughters of the flame, who procession around the earth, garbed in white, templed robes, which they once wore as priestesses on the continent of Lemuria. And these souls of light are now returning to the 12 shrines of Mu, the motherland, and to the central altar. And in the etheric plane, as in the Akashic record, there is now taking place a ceremony which is known as the Restoration, where all these priestesses who have gone forth and who have spent considerable thousands of years away from the keeping of the altar of the Mother in the 12 houses of the son of Mu are returning. They return robed in white, having been tried in the fires of tribulation throughout the world. And some come from among this body, and there are others from various bodies of worshippers. And these beloved hearts are for the sign of the return of the Mother, and of the culture of the Mother, and the science, and the very love, and therefore the establishment of the central altar of the being of woman, keeping the very fires of the I Am presence in the midst of life in America, in every nation, beginning with the I Am race on this continent as descendants of Lemuria, is for a new birth of spirituality in the nations, whereby the untransmuted male or divine masculine perverted is no longer able to prevent the raising up of the feminine ray and the divine woman. Truly it is the sign and the hour of the wonder in heaven, of the coming of the woman clothed with the sun. For this archetype of woman is the restoration of that feminine in the sons and daughters of God, and especially in those initiates who were the priestesses of Mu, who must return to the place of their origin and begin once again to raise that flame, as in the temple, so in themselves. You will soon see how the true initiates of this sacred fire of the Mother will come to the fore. And whereas there is a dearth this day of quality material to occupy public offices in this nation and all nations, so there will come, if you endure, if you keep the flame and hold the balance for world conditions, those souls of light who, having atoned therefore for their absence, now return to truly tend in purity's light, the virgin light of the Mother that must nourish the tree of life, if it is to be a green tree with green shoots, and the golden age to appear again. Beloved ones, it is a procession from the far corners of the earth of the coming of these called ones, and they approach the altar, and the representative of the Mother is standing at the central altar, and therefore ready to receive the daughters of God and establish the true sisterhood of life, of Mother, and the meaning of spouse of the Most High. This light and this teaching, beloved ones, is for all to return to the very altar of the Holy Grail, the sacred chakra of the heart. It is a temple teaching that has and will continue to unfold through the dispensation of these messengers' release of the teaching of archangels, given now 25 years and more, according to the word of Sanat Kumara. Let us look to a new day, and let us see that this sign of Aries and the sign of the sun and the wonder in heaven of the appearance of the woman is also recorded as the sign of that other wonder in heaven, the coming of the dragon that opposes the woman and the man-child. This is a recurring theme in the mythology of the gods and in the reality of the sacred path of initiation. Therefore look to the hour, for come this Monday there shall return the dark cycle in Aries, which, as you have been told, signifies the returning karma of all of the fallen angels who followed after Lucifer, who followed after Peshualga, who was one of a number, specifically 12 renegades, who determined to pervert the light of the archangels in their schools of light on the 12 points of the rays of the sun. Beloved ones, this returning karma brings to play again, as a replay of an old movie, of the sign of the oppressors of the woman and her seed, and this great light now dawning, resurrecting from the temples of the motherland. Anticipate and understand, therefore, that the light which God does bring to you by my very sacred centers, the transmission of the 7 rays this day and ongoing through this conference, is for the swallowing up and the consuming of every attempt of darkness to replay and recreate the old rebellion. Those fallen angels whose time has come anticipate with great nostalgia and sympathy the reliving of the moments of their heroics, beloved ones, when they thought they were king of the mountain, princes of the air, and those empowered to dominate all lesser life. They have had their day, and I, Archangel Gabriel, pronounce the word of the Almighty. Their time is up. No more will there be extended any cycles from the hand of Almighty God. They are cut off from Alpha and Omega, from God the Father in the heaven and God the Mother in the earth. They have no other source of light except the Father, Mother God. Accept this, beloved hearts, that the children of the Father, Mother God should in ignorance once again worship these fallen ones and lend them their light in pity. This pity is transmitted through the rock music and the drug addictions and the enslavement in the cults, pagan cults of sensuality emanating from Baalbek and the god Baal in the Middle East. See to it that you go after these conditions and records by the avenging sword of an archangel, with the vengeance of Almighty God, that is the Lord's and not thine own, yet he will pass it through thy heart as you invoke the word. See to it, therefore, that the anticipated recreation of the past will not even begin to manifest, that all will be cast into the sacred fire, and in fact, the dark cycle in Aries may become the beginning of the light cycle, not of the return of mankind's dark karma, but in fact the return of the light karma of the sons and daughters of God, that can be for the liberation of the children of the sun. Beloved hearts, Alpha and Omega have proposed this day that the good karma of the causal bodies of the sons of heaven and earth might also be released to swallow up by sacred fire the momentum of the dark cycles. This proposal is being considered by councils of the sun, by the 24 elders, and even the lords of karma serving this evolution. I can assure you that the dark cycle of returning karma is not alone a condition of earth, but of many worlds throughout the far-flung matter spheres, and thus it is the desire of Alpha and Omega, seeing the devotion of the ancient priests and priestesses of light who never left the tending of the altar, as well as the devotion of the sons and daughters of God presently exercising the science of the spoken word, that by this extraordinary devotion and victory of light there might come a blessing that can sweep aside and consume all of the laggard and serpent karma that yet afflicts the planetary bodies. Beloved ones, your service and that which has been rendered over many months by all of you and more across the world has weighed in this consideration, and because of it, beloved hearts, Alpha and Omega have actually been able to contemplate this solution to the problem of the oncoming dark cycles. It is not the desire of God that the fallen ones should be allowed to outplay their wickedness again and again, but it has been the mandate of the people for their willful ignorance and rebellion and failure to receive those sent to give them the truth. Thus, when some and the one respond, it is always the majority of God. Now many sons brought into the captivity of the science of the spoken word are therefore a hope and a promise to God himself that there might be a better way and an alternate way, beloved hearts. You understand that in the scales held by Portia, the mighty scales of life, the good karma focused physically by the sons of God in the earth, must outweigh all of the darkness of the returning dark cycles of the fallen angels and their evolutions. But beloved hearts, do you realize just how great is the virtue and the momentum in the causal bodies of the embodied light bearers and Christed ones and the Buddhas who have been sent? Dear hearts of light, contemplate the mystery of God and the mystery of the causal body, and realize that there is indeed a great reservoir of light waiting to be used to hold this balance. The key is in the lever of the heart, released by the spoken word. For when you pray, when you speak the fiat of the very fires of creation, there comes pouring down the momentum of fire of your causal body that cannot be quenched, cannot be used up, for it is the purest light of your momentum of good works. And when it is sent forth again to good purpose, it only multiplies and returns, and thus you increase daily by a great magnitude the power of your causal body when you call it into action for the blessing, healing of the world, the challenging of the seed of the wicked, and declare with Maitreya that light of your causal body may never be requalified by the human consciousness, especially by those who would intimidate by inimical means of subterfuge and psychological maneuvering your light, your soul, your spirit. Therefore, hearts of living fire, if you would direct the momentum of your causal body for the holding of this balance, you must know that you will not forget my instruction, that you make the call always for the sealing of the light of your causal body, that no one in any octave of the matter spheres, worlds without end, may ever requalify that light, and therefore let it be sealed in the mighty blue sphere of cosmos. This call having been made, I say, guard thine own purity, harmony, and victory, and do not descend to lesser manifestations. So in this calling, you, before your time, may join the avatars in holding the balance of world and galactic karma against the renewed and attempted infamy of the fallen ones. See how God, in his infinite law, infinite science, and infinite religion, may provide the way and the means within the framework of that mathematics for the rescue, the salvation, and the forgiveness of his own. We seek to implement a plan, and all who are emanations of the Godhead gaze with steadfast mien upon that central light, and by its emanations we discover what is that acceptable method of disentangling the woman and her seed from the wiles of the tempter. Thus I say, rescue the woman, her children, rescue priestesses of God and the man-child, stand for truth with Pallas Athena, and recognize that there are more powers and sources to access and release than you have ever dreamed of, if you will only incline your heart and with renewed determination and the eye of an archangel recognize that there are truly ways and means that are practical today to sidestep, to overcome, and to swallow up the entire flood which the dragon spews out of his mouth to devour the child as soon as he is born. Let the Christ of the man-child be in you, beloved, for once having seen his face, you will never more turn away from the Son of God. Such a pity that some must pass into nothingness in the obscurity of the night for want of piercing the veil of their own pride, to then behold and bow before that living Son. Blessed hearts, it is no longer in the hands of an archangel to rend that veil. They have created it. They have failed miserably. They cover over their failure with their intellectual pride, their social pursuits, their awards and congratulations, their tributes to one another in place of the living God. But they shall never ever hide the failure of their souls to magnetize God and to desire to enter him and know the self no more save as God. To us this is no loss, for we are more of him and therefore more of the self he created than ever before. And so are ye, when ye surrender to the eternal cross, the sign of white fire descending, white fire uniting all hearts of light in the matter sphere. The sign of the great white brotherhood be upon you, for I, Gabriel, assure you that the archangels will not allow in this dark cycle the covering over of this earth by these fallen ones who left off from the service of our God so long ago. And we too have something to say about it, and we stand with Alpha and Omega and with you, dear hearts, attending the appearance of the Father, Mother, Love, Wisdom, Helios, in the heart of the inner retreat, and Vesta in the sun. May you be present for this sun appearing in the sign of light. I am Gabriel, always bearing the good tidings of great joy, new birth within you. Lo, I am the Grail. Its mystery I breathe upon you. Beloved heart friends of the will of God, I salute you from the Darjeeling Council chambers, where Saint Germain and I would convey to you the enormous love of our hearts for your efforts and oneness, and for the great strides that have been made in pushing back the darkness and establishing, as it were, a new frontier of freedom. For is not the ranch a new frontier as well as the heart? And have you not explored the fastnesses of soul territory beyond those heretofore adventured? I think so. And I think also that the very pushing back of planes and the sense of penetration of etheric octaves, even those of our retreats, has given to many of you the sense of the imminence of possibilities, of transcending worlds and time and space, and reaching beyond with less and less mystery and difficulty, and the realization, beloved hearts, that heaven is surely one in increments, the ranch being a territory somewhere between that earth and heaven, lodged in a purity not known in many cities of the earth. Thus the parting of the veil and the sense of the ongoingness of the soul within this life opportunity, and on to the next, is something that we also cherished when we were in embodiment. We enjoy seeing you draw back the curtain on the next room of life. We enjoy seeing you sense a freedom, a spirit and a dimension that you did not know a year ago or a decade ago. This too is the ascension process. This too is the means whereby courage is engendered, fear is overcome, and dangers are pierced, even as one pierces a veil or plunges the sword through a phantom and finds nothing there. Beloved ones of the light, Saint Germain and I would speak to you also concerning the future of the nations and the future of their economies, which hangs in a delicate balance. Saint Germain would also speak to you now regarding the presidential elections in the United States. As we sit together this evening with Mother Mary, the great divine director, and are honored here by the presence of beloved Hercules, we therefore shed our light on some issues and also attempt to draw you close to Darjeeling, where the winds resemble those here, and the coolness of the evening reminds of the Himalayas, and the Rockies brought nearer to our hearts by your own dear flames. My beloved keepers of the flame, I have been concerned regarding the state of the nation's consciousness, the basis on which people discriminate or not concerning the selection of leaders in every field. I am even more concerned, as you have become, that the manipulation behind the scenes by secret societies, various conspiracies not even known to you, and those organizations that have been clearly defined before in the lectures of the messenger. Thus we know that between power and money, many strings are pulled, and behind the scenes forces are at play to determine how much can now be gained for those who think they are in power in this period of change. As you know, change as flux is always an opportunity for the amassing of power by those who stand to gain the most by change and who are the arch manipulators of the winds of change as well as the changing of the tides. Thus the opportunity for new leadership that comes to this government and this nation, which is and ought to be there to secure the ability of the people to promote new ideas, to remove old ones, to learn by mistakes as well as victories. Beloved hearts of light, we therefore point to what we consider to be a grave concern and a serious weakness in the entire structure of the nation. It has come clear over many months that this administration and also previous administrations have become more and more burdened by public servants on the public payroll who are forming a larger and larger bureaucracy, making weightier and more complex the decision implementing process which may result in action, right action for the moving forward of the nation. The bureaucracy which is a building and has been so in this nation since earlier in the century, especially under the New Deal, now resembles those periods in India, in China, and even in Russia, when through the centuries there has taken place the build-up of an overwhelming system of red tape, of petty servants and favors, whereby ultimately the light vested in a government no longer flowed to the people, nor the people's needs satisfied by the government. The circumstance of the candidates is to us very grave. These individuals would have been seen clearly a decade ago as in fact enemies of the integrity of the nation and the protection of that nation. Their policies, promises, and attitudes toward world communism are such that we find it would be most difficult to work through any of these candidates. It is not that we have per se anything against the electoral process or many of the concerns held by the hearts that lean toward the very heart of Christ. We must say, therefore, that although there is much found wanting, our concern is this, that if the support of keepers of the flame and our counsel does not remain, the alternative will make for all intents and purposes an impossibility for the Darjeeling Council to implement on behalf of the light those necessary considerations, those necessary steps which must be taken in these very years within this decade as we move toward that which is coming in the world before the year 2000. Thus we examine what are the problems of the Reagan administration, and we see that there is a bureaucracy as well as servants in high places surrounding the president that are not fulfilling the best interests of the nation, that are in fact at odds with the president and his policies, or that do not have the background, the insight, or even the spiritual fire to be the instruments of our service. We see, therefore, that simultaneously with the cutting free of the president from all influences, even those unknown by him, there must be a series of decrees given for the judgment of those who are adverse to light and to freedom, who in fact hold back that which we might otherwise accomplish through the administration. that there be the binding of those who are committed to darkness while they espouse a line and a platform of freedom. Simultaneously, we desire to see fervent calls made for the raising up of sons of light, minute men and women of my own, and servants of God who will take their stand and not be concerned whether of sacrifice or of any blackmail that should come upon them or manipulation for past mistakes they may have made. Beloved hearts, you must call for those who are already in position, who are ready to take their place, and who ought to be anointed by us to reinforce the will of God, which after all cannot succeed through one individual alone, even if that individual be the President of the United States. Therefore, our determination and desire does to a great extent depend on those supporters being in the Congress and being in the state governments, being in the departments and the agencies of the federal government, that they might therefore provide the impetus and the momentum for a fruitful and productive term that may hold the balance in terms of the economy and the national debt, and may make wise policy concerning the future possibility of any financial crisis, of inflation, and a subsequent depression. These things are almost quixotic. Almost in a Mercurian fashion does the economy move. This is only the appearance, for as you know, cause is set in motion, not checked, not dealt with, a false concept and a false teaching of Keynesian economics. And individuals who do not have common sense or a practical awareness of how a nation's economy functions has brought about a situation of immense burden, a burden which sits squarely upon the shoulders of the American citizen. The people of this nation bear an extraordinary burden of karma for the earth and the karma of the fallen ones who have mismanaged the supply, the very money of the people itself, as well as international banking policies. It will take a great deal of violet flame, a certain amount of background, which you may gain by your own reading, and a devotion to holding the stability within oneself. The emotions of the nation affect the economy, the faith of the people in God, the faith of the people in themselves, and in the free enterprise system, which must not be put down by the easy giveaway of technology and secrets to the enemy, which must not be deterred or discouraged by incorrect tariff systems or an attempt to equalize the international trade at the expense of the American manufacturer. As we have mentioned before, we are greatly concerned regarding the nation's resources being in the position of being useful as a deterrent to world war, and this is not as it should be and ought to be decreed for, as well as worked toward in your efforts to influence those who are your representatives. This is one of the cumbersome problems of a republic and a democracy, as you know, that by the time the will of the people is reflected in the Congress and action is taken, there is a serious question of loss of time. And this is one advantage of a dictatorship, which itself is at a great disadvantage when those dictators have become ossified and calcified and unable to act in the least bit by a spark of hope or a sense of freedom, but are reduced, moreover, to a sense of fear. We speak then of the members of the Politburo of the Soviet Union, and we would tell you that more than ever before, The burden of fear upon this hierarchy is such, as we have also said to you, that war and responses and decisions are more apt to be triggered by fear than any other vibration or condition of consciousness. This fear does not so much involve the fear of the United States, although this may be the apparent reason even to themselves, but the fear involves their own demise, the crumbling of their system from within, its inability to stand on its own, and the certain knowledge that the West, even with the worst manipulators and the best intentions, cannot forever sustain world communism. Even today, the Western bankers are admitting that they are in an insurmountable crisis through loans to communist nations in the Third World. One of these days, beloved hearts, even despite the seed of the wicked, there shall come the hour when there simply is no more funds to supply the beast of world socialism, no more grain or technology to fan the fires of world totalitarian movements. The people ought to be ready and prepared for that moment and understand that there will come an hour of supreme weakness, not only in the world of communism, but in the entire hierarchies of the nations, of those who have usurped the authority of the people and who themselves have showed themselves as if standing for the people, but in their policies and in their accomplishments, they have in fact moved against and counter to the protection of the sacred labor of the people and of their lives and of the integrity of the nations. I tell you, beloved hearts, the most valuable commodity in America is the heart flame of the people and their sacred labor. It is trampled upon, it is misused, it is desecrated, and it is squandered. It has been a source of unending light and supply to all of the fallen angels of the earth for at least a century and more. Realize, therefore, beloved hearts, that those who have such a precious gift of the light of the great white brotherhood in their daily service and workplace ought to come to the place of cherishing that light, cherishing the very holiness of their labor, and begin to realize that because it is sanctified by God, it must be protected, and in order to have that protection, they must invoke the intercession of the archangels. We, the members of the Darjeeling Council, consider, therefore, that the acquaintance of the people of this nation and the light bearers of all nations with the 7 archangels is a most important and worthy effort that ought to be undertaken, together with the understanding of how to call to the archangels for that absolutely necessary intercession that must take place if the people themselves are to rise up lawfully according to the revolution of the heart and the revolution in higher consciousness to overtake those who usurp their light, their power, and their authority to self-govern. Beloved ones, we are not in favor of the supplying with the current regime in Red China of technology and the wherewithal to build itself up to become a power that can be used against the West at will. Knowing the ancient cruelty of these life streams as demonstrated in ages not even chronicled, we can tell you that with power, they have abused that power almost more than any other group evolving on the earth. And therefore, we are not in favor of the decisions that have been made by the President or those contemplated in this current trip to Red China. Let all understand, therefore, that the position of the United States vis-a-vis the Soviet Union in this hour, the position of facing the possibility of war in the European theater and world war at that, has been brought about entirely by Western capitalists and unalert and sometimes very dark leaders in the United States who have allowed this building of the Soviet Empire to take place. Now they have turned to do the same in Red China before this people has even bent the knee or proclaimed the flame of freedom as paramount. This ought to occupy a large share of your determined decrees, to see to it that those who, when given power, will not take that power to wreak upon mankind an unmitigated evil. The calls for the binding of these individuals and for a proper resolution and an enlightenment of the American leadership must be at hand. I can only tell you, with an alternative administration, things could be far worse. We desire to see them far better, and we cannot say that we endorse an individual, but that we stand on a platform of freedom, and we must work through those who have determined in their hearts to at least be able to lend an ear and to receive our counsel. Beyond this, you must realize that when the counsel is given and many voices speak and modify and rearrange and recommend other solutions, it is difficult for a single leader to maintain, even without personal knowledge, contact with our level and to take that strong stand that is necessary. Given the well-meaning intentions of those surrounding the President, and yet the very bad advice that has been given on some occasions, you can well understand that when there are those who are not of goodwill functioning at other levels, in other conspiracies and orders, for other purposes, to move the world closer and closer to a one-world totalitarian state, and that these also may have access to influence the President, even to the point of a threatening influence, it is most difficult to occupy that position, and few who have tried to remain independent have remained. Witness, therefore, the independence of Abraham Lincoln or of John Kennedy. It was their independence and their free spirits and their determination to expose the conspiracy itself that brought about their demise. This very circumstance, beloved hearts, illustrates to all that there is only a certain line that can be drawn, a certain stand that can be taken by anyone in embodiment, no matter how great the honor and the love and the dedication, without the assistance of the great white brotherhood. I give you now, once again, beloved MORYA, who would speak to you on this very point of the law and the teaching. Beloved devotees of the will of God, Saint Germain made known to you in Washington, D.C., the concept of the realm of the possible. With the Soviet downing of the Korean plain, you were able to witness just how far the world and the United States could or would go. And what made the difference was their state of awareness, their ability to deal with fear, with threat, with world circumstance. Thus, the level of expectations that we have for accomplishment in this century are tempered by that which we can see is the acceptable and expected performance of a given individual in a seat of authority in an elected office. There are plans that ought to be accomplished. There are protections that ought to be taken militarily and economically. Yet there are no instruments or servants who are either able to see the wisdom of our counsel to understand it, or who are able to implement it or have the courage to do so. Some of the moves that are necessary in this hour, if espoused by one in office, would mean political suicide. As you know, when it comes down to holding office and election time draws around, those in office must be concerned above all with remaining in office and being re-elected. This often influences their position, and they are not free, if they would so choose, to stand for situations and policies that are unpopular. Our strategy then, and the only solution that the Darjeeling Council can offer, which comes from the very heart of Mother Mary, with the wisdom of Jesus and Kuthumi, who also serve here in our deliberations, is to recommend that you isolate those issues that are most necessary and which concern all the people and the fate of the nations, that you decree on these issues, but above all, that you seek to educate the people and to influence public opinion by writing your letters to the editors, to your representatives, by appearing, if necessary, on television and radio programs, and to keep on repeating the message and to showing the workability of a solution that may not be obvious to the general public. This task may not be as difficult as you think, for we have seen in the past how our exposés and the calls and invocations we have dictated through the messenger at the altar, taken up by yourselves, has resulted in a change of public opinion and political climate. In fact, so much so that when we rejoice in what has been done by the direct transfer of the heart of fire to other hearts of fire, we can see how much more can be accomplished when that transfer is also made at the intellectual and mental level by education and public speaking and by writings. Thus we come back to the communication of the word and to the legions of Mercury and to the understanding that to communicate both by the spoken and the written word becomes one of the most valuable tools in the hand and the heart of the keepers of the flame. To be able to set forth the logic of an idea and a proposal, to buttress it with facts and research, to endow it with a flame and a spirit and a heart that will catch across the nations. This, of course, has been one of the mightiest means for change, and change for the better that is worked in all of the history of mankind. On the other hand, those who have developed this ability through long centuries of practice, the sophists who have come as serpents, and their ability through logic to convince the people to take the downward path, the path of least resistance and compromise, where the ends justify the means, have also wreaked havoc and created a great influence. And when they have engendered in their communications a powerful momentum, a spirit not of the true Holy Spirit, but of black magic, they have also been able to arouse the people and move nations, as in the case of World War II and the influence of the people of Germany, not by one, but any number of leaders who are operating under the Black Brotherhood. Beloved ones, when you consider the control of the media today and the control of education at many levels by forces that do not desire to see the God freedom of the children or the people, you must understand that those who know the right and have the light and the wisdom are fewer in number than those who pursue the left-handed path, and fewer still are those of the light who are able to communicate that which they do know. We are absolutely certain and confident that the correct information and education concerning the social issues, the political and economic issues that we have long espoused and those that we have exposed will bring about an awakening and a quickening. Therefore, we have not let down in our determination to assist you, to support you, to give you dispensations for stumping on secular issues and for bringing those points of life and areas of your own expertise to the attention of groups across the nations. We are heartened to see that many have already done this and are doing so, and we do trust that that Summit University Forum, sponsored by the Goddess of Liberty and the Lords of Karma, will also be the means of bringing to the American people new information and carefully concealed ideas or knowledge that ought to be in their hands. We also see that these interviews can become the nucleus for your own forums and points of discussion that you may hold in your cities, and also for the sponsoring of speakers if you yourselves do not consider yourself as qualified or adept on certain issues. It is well for you to form councils, just as we have a Darjeeling Council, so you may form your own councils, councils of freedom and information, whereby you come together and, working together, evolve the most practical and meaningful solutions and plans to be a powerhouse and a source of much information and the focusing of public attention on various issues. As we have mentioned before, this is your freedom to do as private citizens rather than as a member of a religious community. You are free to do so in any capacity and from any standpoint where you position yourself most comfortably regarding legislation and lawmaking as it is carried on a day-to-day basis in your own states as well as in the federal government. We recommend also that out of concern for Saint Germain, that there be a focusing of decrees on the United Nations as a building and a center used by the communists and their international spy network to move against the United States and all nations, and to use that body to put the United States in a bad light continually, to use that body to gain funds for their projects and to get a foothold in the United States where they may carry on their espionage activities. I must tell you that although the inception of the idea in the minds of lovers of freedom to have a council representing the nations of the earth must surely come from the Great White Brotherhood, this particular endeavor was masterminded by the dark forces as a means to preempt the coming of that body of the spiritual elect and the representatives of the Great White Brotherhood, who should represent their nations not by political maneuvering and not on a political basis, but because they are the spiritual savants and those who have the highest loyalties to the cause of freedom, to the Brotherhood, and inner training at the Darjeeling Council. I propose, therefore, that you create what might have been called a shadow cabinet, but is not a shadow at all, but the matrix of the original and divine idea of United Nations, and that the many who have come here from all over the world to study with me in this quarter of Summit University begin to consider themselves as ambassadors of light, representing the concerns of their people, understanding their nations better, and being able to serve well on a council that does meet regularly and discuss the affairs of their nations. This body of people who may volunteer and also be selected should serve as a counterpart to ministering servants who represent the spiritual body of servants who tend the altar and the hearts and souls of the membership, those who represent their nations and embody the concerns for their society's education, trade, business, finance, politics, ought to dedicate themselves to this purpose and consider themselves responsible and accountable for the affairs of state, in that these conditions are studied by them and are acted upon deftly with the science of the spoken word, with dynamic decrees, and that they are not ignored. You will see how your voice and vote with the Darjeeling Council and the power and momentum of your decrees nation by nation, not the least of which ought to be the United States of America, can make the difference in world action. I can assure you that the diminishing of the peace movements in Europe, and especially in Germany, has to do with a stand taken by students all over the world on behalf of Saint Germain, and with a certain knowledge that this nation ought to be protected. This is an instance where the level of attainment and the awareness of the German people themselves was not adequate to deal with the dark forces coming through the peace party, the Green Peace Party. Beloved ones of light, understand that therefore the equation of the difference between that level of consciousness and their burden by these fallen ones and the level of the attainment of the light bearers was crossed. The barrier was overcome, and the dynamic decrees given by students in every nation was responsible for the diminishing of that power and the ongoingness of the policies that were supported by the United States and by the German government. As a result, these missiles in place represent the determination and the will of God not to allow the communists to pass into Western Europe and to overtake West Germany. Here is a clear example where the spiritual body, we might say an elite body of light bearers, came together and determined that they would not pass. Their light communicated to the hearts and souls of many of the German people who were not in favor of this party or its activities. And therefore, by the inner consent of their souls, though they had an absence of outer ability to know what to do in the face of it, the law could act and the saints of God could intervene, and thus, with continued vigilance and diligence, there can be sustained unnecessary protection, forestalling an impetuous act by the Soviets triggered by fear or other considerations that would not be the better part of wisdom. We desire to see, therefore, a very strong stand taken by the Chilas of Scandinavia concerning the exercise of the Soviets in their ships and submarines in that area of the world. We desire to see the information concerning those activities made available through this body of world servers by communication, one to the other, and therefore that the decrees can move forward, and that there will be engendered in the people of Scandinavia a courage, a determination, a forthrightness not to allow their waters to be violated by the Soviets. Nation by nation and section by section, wherever these fallen ones pursue and attempt to find a weakness or a fear or a path of least resistance, there the body of light bearers must stand. There you must come at inner levels in your etheric bodies. There you must place yourselves and resist them with a full fervor and the fire of the heart. Thus it becomes necessary for you to be informed, as we are informed, as to what is happening and what are the most critical events that are occurring on the face of the earth, so that, beloved hearts, your decrees are not in vain, not dissipated, not directed here and there, but focused on an immediate issue that requires your consideration. It is not possible for the headquarters of this church, with the responsibilities incumbent upon the office of the messenger, for these services of communication and research and general awareness of the student body to be accomplished. Thus, I leave it in the good hands of keepers of the flame to organize themselves and to determine who among you shall form a committee for the transmittal of information on a worldwide scale to the nuclei, the amethyst jewel centers that are now established in many nations of the world. Surely the swift awareness and the sudden knowledge of these conditions and the direct and immediate action by group leaders and keepers in every walk of life can mean the difference in many a crisis. The greatest tragedy is that there are events happening on the face of the earth which you have no knowledge of, which are not carried in the media, and these events, one by one, effecting change, amalgamate forces and policies that move against the light of freedom. Therefore, from the heart of the Masters of the Darjeeling Council, and from Saint Germain and myself, beloved ones, there comes the call to Helios and Vesta for the dispensation, whereby you may make general calls to us and give to the authority of the entire spirit of the Great White Brotherhood each day the power to act in your name and by the full momentum of your causal bodies as one in those areas which we deem of vital and urgent necessity. If you will give us, as it were, the carte blanche, if you will give to us and empower us by the authority of your free will to act in the physical octave in these treacherous areas of world intrigue, I can assure you that we will do so. And if you will give your calls concertedly to beloved mighty Hercules, and call for the forces of Hercules, millions and legions of angels of Hercules, with those of Archangel Michael, our bands, and of the god star Sirius, to take action, you will discover that the Great White Brotherhood and the Chelas in embodiment will checkmate many a dark plot that could advance the cause of darkness when it need not be so. We are concerned with the international intrigue of organized crime coming from many nations in league with world communism where it suits their mutual ends, especially in drug trafficking, in pornography and prostitution, and all manner of violent crime. Beloved hearts, the siphoning of the life of business and the free enterprise system by organized crime is a problem in every nation. The demoralization of the people, their intimidation and threat, and murders that continue, of which you are wholly unaware. These things ought not to be, and as you demonstrated when you gave your weekend in a prayer vigil on organized crime, results can be forthcoming when hearts are one in a united purpose. We bring to your attention, therefore, from the very heart of Jesus and Mother Mary, the awareness of the fallen ones, of the very power that is at the heart of this community of light bearers, this church universal and triumphant, which is our dearest love and greatest hope. Therefore, because of the awareness of certain forces, of the very power that is emanated through your hearts, we must also give to you the consideration that there are forces, some you are aware of and some not, that have determined by their own cults of hatred to destroy this church and this messenger and every single disciple that has come through this teaching. This they have attempted to do by every means, legally and illegally, by gossip, by calumny, by lawsuits, by subterfuge, by carrying on a campaign against the light and the person of the messengers. I should caution you, therefore, that decrees on an ongoing basis are needed for the protection of this citadel of light. For this brings me to the original point of the raising of the levels of the people's awareness so that they can take a greater stand in those particular situations of international crisis, such as those in El Salvador and Nicaragua. Beloved ones, the pillar of the lighthouse must be raised, the fortification of the fortress intensified. If we can here raise a light and raise it higher and intensify it without having to be concerned about the Chila's ability to withstand this darkness, this onslaught, or the temptations to be discordant or inharmonious in their own feelings. If we can be certain of the reinforcement of the white fire and the ability of the Chila to stand in the face of any and all threats and whatever may come, you will see that the greater light that can be poured into this community and the greater expansion of its membership will serve in effect to be the ensign, to be the very light of the leaven of the woman that will leaven the whole consciousness of the world and make clear the vision of our God concerning a darkness that has become a gray area where people do not understand right and wrong. They do not understand relativity or the absolute forces that are encountering at that proverbial Megiddo in the confrontation of Armageddon. Blessed hearts, this activity and its chelas represents the most practical and effective group of souls who understand the meaning of checking the dark ones in the very streets of life. Some of our best servants, alas, are found in most impractical spiritual organizations where the stress is upon private attainment and withdrawal from